forebrain area, the proximal nodular section of our children moving. This is because someone who has proximal nodule can see clearly but is unable to recognize individuals. Proximal nodule is defined as the inability to identify or recognize a person's face. Proximal nodule has two types: developmental proximal nodule and acquired proximal nodule. According to some studies, 2 to 2.5% of people have some degree of developmental proximal nodule. The protagonist Anna from the moving face in the crowd developed proximal nodule as a result of the head injury. She was initially terrified, powerless, and helpless, and faced big problems in her life. For example, Anna's closer friend died by the killer was that due to the fact that she was unable to recognize the killer face. As a result, Anna's psychologist gave her the advice to remember person distinguishing feature in order to overcome her face blindness. Through watching the face in the crowd moving, we can learn that the most typical proximal nodule symptoms include difficulty recognizing familiar face in real life or in photograph, feeling of disorientation when in a crowded area, and inability to describe face problem, distinguishing people wearing uniform or other similar clothing, and others. Face blindness frequently influences people from birth and is normally a problem a person has for most of all of their life, so must learn how to recognize others, such as remembering distinguishing features, access, door walking pattern, and others characteristics.
So I will answer the question 2. Explain some of the factors that you consider play in a significant role in the learning the behavior. So as we can see from the film Face in the Crowd, we can see the main character is Anna is facing the prosopagnosia or face blindness, and we can see she cannot recognize the face. Usually she cannot recognize the face immediately like others because it has some damage on her brain and so on. So what is the behavior that we can learn from this film is the first is the people who suffer from prosopagnosia symptom will cannot recognize their face and others' face. This is really difficult because in this film, you know, Anna is chasing by the serial killer, Theo Jack. So it is really important to Anna to recognize the face that the murder. So from this kind, what the method that we can use to identify her face and others' face is we can see the she learned from the psychiatrist a lot of the pictures from the learning from image. We can see how she learned to recognize some people by the some of the features in the face and so on. So this is one the effective thing that she can do. So the second is what we learn from the behavior about prosopagnosia people is sometimes prosopagnosia people also can learn from the clothes, from the voice and so on. For example, it has one scene in the Face in the Crowd that Anna is trying to recognize her boyfriend by see the tie that her boyfriend wears. So this is also effective because they cannot easily found the face that they want to see, but they can recognize from the tie, from the clothes, from the eating, their behavior and so on. And lastly, what we can learn from the behavior of prosopagnosia people is sometimes the prosopagnosia people of face blindness symptom, they cannot identify the what we call the emotion of the pupil because they cannot see the face. If we as a normal person we can see the person, oh, he is anger to me, she is anger to me and so on. But Anna, for example, Anna in this film cannot recognize the emotion because she cannot feel or see the face easily. So what he can learn is the prosopagnosia people can learn by the intonation of the voice. Because that is affect their eyes and their brain and sensation and perception about to see the other people. But the ears is okay, so they can learn to recognize some of the big difference about the tones voice. For example, maybe the anger tone is different, the sad tone is different, the friendly tones, the happiness tone is different. So from this, prosopagnosia people can learn from image, learn from categorize of the clothes, food and so on, and lastly learn from the voice.
Good day, doctor. My name is Langsini and my matrix number is 278352. I will present question 3, the primary biological foundations of psychology that is linked to the behavior in our case study. So the main character, Anna, suffered a slight cerebral shock, causing her to lose the ability to recognize people's faces after being attacked by the killer, and she was diagnosed with prosopagnosia, or known as face blindness. So Anna is most likely to suffer the acquired prosopagnosia, which is developed after brain damage, often after a stroke or head injury. So the main biological foundations of psychology that is linked to prosopagnosia is the brain. The brain is a complex organ that controls touch, memory, vision, emotions, thought, and error process that regulates our body, and is divided into 3 basic areas, which are the hindbrain, midbrain, and forebrain. So in this case, we will look into the forebrain. It is the largest and the most developed part of the human brain, and the cerebral cortex contains the large parts of forebrain, which consists of the cerebrum and the outer layer that lies on top of the cerebrum. The cerebral cortex is involved with many high-level functions, including emotions, memory, reasoning, and consciousness, and there are 4 main lobes in the cortex, which are frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes. So temporal lobes will be the main focus of prosopagnosia. Adverse conditions of prosopagnosia is caused by abnormalities or damage in the temporal lobes, particularly the right fusiform gyrus, which is a fault in the brain which functions to coordinate the neural systems that control facial perceptions and memory. There are also other functions like non-verbal interpretations, sound to visual image conversions, and language comprehensions. So this part of the brain allows us to compare a person's face with all of the faces stored in our memory within nanoseconds. Therefore, it allows a normal person to recognize faces in much details, whereas a person diagnosed with prosopagnosia would depend on a less sensitivity object recognition system to recognize faces. So from this, we can clearly understand that the brain is the primary biological foundations of psychology that link to the brain conditions of prosopagnosia.
I will answer the question for describe 2 suggestions on how we resolve this issue from the study case. Our study case is face vagueness. This issue does not have a specific treatment, but sufferers can help the affairs by recognizing and remembering the existence of a person through their voice, body language, hairstyle, and clothing. The second one is model properties, involve 2 neural networks that can be described through architecture, learning function, and information and transmission. In the properties model, we have 7 stimulus. The first one in unsupervised learning of correlated patterns. The first stimulus teach how to group the same patterns and image into the same space. This helps the sufferer to classify objects into the same category without a mistake. The second one is plasticity of learning. The sufferer will be taught to remain plastic when presented with new patterns to avoid making mistakes in the recognition process. Without a permanent standard, it cannot help sufferer to deal with this issue. And the second one is correlation between the topological representation and the outputs label. This method is known for sure through 2 sub-stimulations, with a maps as input and label as output, which will help the sufferer develop an attractive map in each of them in the first stimulation. And for the 4th step is help generalize and remember new pattern. For the 5th step is recalling the noise pattern. It is designed to test the network in grouping behavior in the presence of noise patterns. The 6th step is prosopagnosia implementation. The stimuli will break a part of the topological map that causes prosopagnosia. It is made by turning off the topological filtering unit and sending the label recognition through the second network. The last one is broadness of memory trains depending on the level of specificity. Memory consolidation depends on the level of specialization that compare the effect of the lesion to a map that will connect it to the basic semantic label. Early stage labels a more robust to lesion than lower level because they have a more connection and lesion must be larger to effect all.
First of all, the theory of face perception, Bruce and Young theoretical model. This model contends that the intermediate and later phases of facial recognition, which is beginning with the facial recognition unit, FRU and beyond, are influenced by previous experiences with a person's face. Moreover, every unique perspective of a face has its own person identification nodes, BINs, pins, that hold semantic data about the person, which can activate the FRU, and the more times it is activated, the more familiar with the face one perceives. When a conceptual framework of the face built using the primary theory, people can compare it to other faces, which is different pins in memory storage. However, people with prosopagnosia cannot recognize the faces of different people. They may also see different faces performed that do not belong to that people, from different angles, or even unable to recognize their own faces. Based on scenes in Faces in the Crowd, Anna suffered prosopagnosia after a serial killer attack resulted in a brain injury. She saw the students in her class who all had the same faces, even cannot recognize her own face in the mirror. It means that when she perceives facial information, it is difficult for her to process the pin because there are different faces that keep changing performed in her field of vision, so the FRU cannot be activated to identify with other pins in her memory. Secondly, which is visual perception theory. Psychologists identify this theory into bottom-up processing and top-down processing. Bottom-up processing means that the perception starts with the stimulus and be analyzed more complicated in the following phases. This theory mostly describes about top-down processing, which implies the application of contextual data to identify the pattern. For example, reading the entire sentences make it easier to comprehend the complex handwriting than just reading individual words. As well as Gestalt theory, places a strong emphasis on the idea that everything is better as a whole than in isolation. Thus, Related to prosopagnosia, the problem is that persons with prosopagnosia is impossible or very difficult to perform top-down processing. They prefer to identify a person with a single special facial feature, such as eye color and hair color, compared with people without prosopagnosia, who can see the face as a whole and recognize it. In the movie of Faces in the Crowd, Anna, that has prosopagnosia, she sees her boyfriend's face is different at different times, causing her to be confused. So, she identifies her boyfriend, Bryce, by his tie style and color when she goes to find him in the train setting.
So that's all from Group 14. Thank you.